Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Gracia. I'm a third year political science student at the University of Toronto. And today we have our lovely guest, Jonathan, who is here to answer our usual questions. So Jonathan, if you could please introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm always happy to speak with students. Of course, I remember what it's like being a student, so I'm more than happy to answer questions. So my name is Jonathan Borelli. I'm a partner at KMB Law. We're based in Mississauga. We work across the GTA. I practice in employment law. Primarily, I help employers, but I do help more senior employees, executive employees. And what else can I tell you? I went to McMaster for my undergrad in political science, and then I went directly into the University of Windsor for law. I practiced, well, I summered and I articled, and I'm sure you'll have more questions about that. I summered, I articled at a firm in Hamilton. I've worked in some smaller firms, larger firms, and like I said, now I'm at KMB.
Great. Well, thank you. So the first question we have for you today is what inspired you, or at what point in your life you decided that you wanted to pursue a career in law?
Great question. I think my answer probably, when I look back, I would have given a different answer depending on when you ask. So where I am right now, I was called in the year 2012. So when I look back, I think my personality has always suited a lot of the work that a lawyer does, but I just didn't recognize it fully. I am a naturally a curious person. I'm naturally an inquisitive person. I am someone who I'm not usually satisfied until I find an answer myself. Okay. Now that's kind of been me. I've been using internet and kind of technology as soon as they let us have it in the computer lab many many years ago. So I've always been motivated by knowledge, and I've always liked reading. You have to like reading if you're going to be a lawyer. So a lot of those things, when I look back, I say, okay, well, those are a lot of the things that that uh, I use on a day-to-day basis when I'm a lawyer. But there's not one way to be a lawyer, to practice law. There are a lot of different ways. So you have I'm kind of naturally inquisitive and curious. Number two, I don't back down from an argument. And people who know me well would say that's true. Even before I started undergrad or wrote the LSATs, went to law school, called to the bar, etc. So that helps. But really, it was for me in my third year when you're kind of thinking about, okay, what do I want to do next? You kind of understand what undergrad is all about, you have to do, and you're making your next steps. So it was there I said, okay, I think, and I also decided at the same time, I want to go directly into law school right after undergrad. So I started that planning the summer after third year. And so at the same time, I was also looking at other different options if I wanted to continue on a master's or do an internship or starting work right away. And I have to say, there's no one way to plan out your legal career. There are plenty of people. I think it's fantastic if you have some work experience before you get into law school. You don't necessarily have to just go right from undergrad right into law school, because you can make some fantastic network, you do some networking, make some fantastic professional connections, and gain corporate experience or experience with a company, and then apply that while you're in law school and after. So I was the one who went directly from undergrad to law school, but there are a lot of ways to do it. But I'm kind of straying away from your question. So I think it was, around my third year, I said, okay, this is what I want to do.
Yes, no, of course, and don't worry about it. I mean, usually these questions lead to, all sorts of
Yeah.
tangents. But yeah, I mean, I'm a third year student and I feel the pressure now where, everyone around me, especially, everyone in an organization like Pre-Law Shadowers and law classes and everything where people are considering law school and they're like, oh, I'm starting to study for the LSAT so I can take it this summer for the first time, or I'm gonna go straight into law, school, or should I do an internship, or should I do a master's, or like, should I go
Mhm.
into, all the same questions that I guess you had, like they're still very, very present today.
Oh, yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I think that's great advice because and much needed right now because the pressure to feel like I think like stay on like this one set out path of like the right way to do things is like real.
Yes, yes. But let me just say one more thing about that. Like I said, there's no one way to go to law school. And I think arguing is something I think a lot of lawyers do, not just litigators. That's a given. But you're constantly arguing, your position over someone else's position. Even, corporate lawyers will do that. Or even trying to convince someone else. So a person, everyone has their own life experience. And I think there's always a way that you can argue or not necessarily spin, but you can argue whatever your life experience is to that point and make it applicable to the practice of law. Like there's no one way to do it. So if if working is really important, there's a way you can, argue that in your personal state. If you go directly from undergrad to law school, there's a way you can argue that too. If you have a master's, if you have additional schooling. So I think someone who can argue well will always find the silver lining in whatever your experience is before you choose to go to law school.
Of course. Um, so okay, the next question that we have for you is in your undergrad, did you take any specific courses or, had any like experience in clubs or groups that really helped you when it comes to LSAT and law school?
Um, okay, so first I would say this. And people watching this too, and you yourself will know, there's no one set of classes that get you into law school. I think I can't speak on behalf of law schools. I remember reviewing some applications when I was in law school. I think the most important thing is that you have the highest grades possible. And it doesn't matter what course it is. Okay. So if you look at it from that perspective, really you just need the highest marks possible. There are maybe perhaps there are easier courses or harder courses. If you have to write a 40-page paper, that's harder than, a multiple choice exam, for example. I think you can also approach it from the place of if you are really motivated to learn what's in that course, you're more likely to do better. So my advice in terms of courses, pick the courses that you like. And again, I'm not speaking on behalf of any law school. I don't know if there's a difference between having a major or two majors or a major and two minors. I don't think that matters. I think that matters for yourself in terms of how you want to specialize. But I think law schools more so they care about do you have a degree? Because a lot of them, I don't know if there's now a requirement that you have a degree, but I think it's really just that 2 year kind of completion. I think law schools care about are your marks the highest? So pick the courses where you're going to get the highest marks. Obviously, you have to pick a major. I was also a poli sci grad. And my elective courses, I started doing some French courses, but they are quite difficult. I found them difficult. I took courses that I really liked and that wouldn't, kind of bring down my average or it's better that they maintain or bring up your average. So I don't think there's any particular course that you need. I think you pick the courses that you know you're going to do well, number one. Uh, some schools, and it's been a little while since I was an undergrad, some schools have more experiential courses. I did a course at McMaster where I was basically like an intern in the municipal government. And then I wrote a paper about municipal law. That was the municipal law course. And there were some classes that went with it too. but I worked kind of part-time for the city. That I think is fantastic experience. A, it gets you out of the classroom, which I think is great. B, you can, especially that course was very applicable, municipal law. You can leverage that into different experiences for your personal statement and interviews after that. I also remember certain like logic courses. I went to McMaster and they have a very popular kind of critical thinking course. It was a requirement, I think it was a required course for social sciences, humanities, and engineering. And my twin brother is in engineering, and he went to McMaster as well. So we didn't take the course at the same time, but it was, the one course that we took, the same course, and economics we took. So that would really help. And really, LSAT, there's that logic puzzles, the games portion, that, probably helps. But in terms of getting into law school, there's no set courses. There are students from all different faculties at law school.
Yes, well, thank you. But yeah, it's funny how, engineering and social science and humanities all have to take one course. I think that just kind of goes to show how important that one course is over like many
Yes.
different industries and everything. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
really
And it's
interesting.
about, that class was about, making arguments. And so it was like philosophy based.
Mm,
And it's similar to like the types of ideas and theories that you address in some courses in law school. At the end of the day, you have to keep this in mind as well. Law school, it teaches the theoretical, right? And it really scratches the surface of a lot of different areas of law. And so to prepare, and the other thing I should say, when you go to law school, there is reading and writing, like a lot of reading, a lot of writing involved. So whatever courses you can take to hone your writing skills, uh, that will definitely help in law school.
yeah. Actually, having said that, I guess this is more this isn't on my typical question list, but you mentioned it. So do you feel like there's a specific like type of writing style that's like right or wrong for law schools?
Oh, that's a really good question. So a lot of the courses in law school, like I said, they're theoretical based. So so it might be quite similar to certain courses that are taught in undergrad. Okay, and of course there are some certain law courses that are maybe lean on the more practical side, like a mediation or an ADR course, for example, or like an advocacy course. I mean, there are theories in that, but that's really going to rely on the practical side. But property law, contract law, a lot of areas of law, they rely on what are the legal theories, and then how are they applied in the case law. So the kind of the basic way you write essays is it's used in law school. I think law school writing is really about persuasive writing. Okay. And it's different than, this is my thesis, here are my 3 points. You have to write in a way that, you can get your point across, but, can really convince the reader that what you're saying is correct. I think something that a lot of, students learn after they finish school, undergrad and law school, is that sometimes more words are not always better. And there are some very clear examples. When you go to court, you win your case, the judge says, okay, I want cost arguments. The judge says you can't write more than 3 pages. Right? And even within the rules of civil procedure, there are sometimes limits on how many pages you can write. So if you can say something in 3 pages, but you can maybe say the same thing in 6 pages, stick to the shorter one. So I think what's also key is shorter, more persuasive, more punchy writing. Uh, when professors say, well, we need a 40-page essay, well, you got to fill 40 pages. Can't really say a lot in 40 pages either. You can say a few points, but you use whatever space you need to use. But the shorter, The more persuasive, the better.
Great. Yeah, because I think with every professor and everything, and I'm still an undergrad, so I can't even imagine this getting worse in law school, but every professor
No, no,
has
it
like a
doesn't get
different
worse. No, no, it doesn't get worse. I think you understand what there's academic writing, of course, and you do plenty of that in any school. I think the more kind of writing you do, the more you understand how to make a point, how to organize your thoughts, right? And this is something I'm happy to talk about the law, the LSAT, a
Yes.
lot. I learned so much from just preparing for the LSAT because you learn really you have to read very fast. You have to be able to glean over some information. That really helped me read even faster than I did before I took the LSAT, and it helped me write too because the most important point needs to go first. Right, the first sentence of a paragraph has to be the most important one. The conclusion, okay, put your conclusion first. Don't save the big surprises for the end. That's some easy kind of tips. The LSAT helps. You learn that through law school as well. I tell that to all the students who work for me, articling students, to say, don't, in journalism, they say, don't bury the lead. Like, put your point, make your point first, and then tell me why, you're right. So that helped me.
Great. Well, you mentioned the LSAT, so actually, if you wouldn't mind like explaining more about your process of like studying and like how it went for you.
Yeah, similar with law school. I mean, there's no right or wrong way to prepare for the LSAT. I think a lot of it has to do with confidence. Okay, you have to, first understand what the task is, right? Understand how it's graded. Understand, I think do they still do that whole the sixth section? That's the experimental section, but they don't tell you which one it is.
I actually don't know yet.
Okay, they probably still do. From what I remember, unless they've changed it, they only grade you on 4 sections, but you write 6 sections of the test. But they throw in an experimental section, which the questions are more difficult, but they don't count. They're just kind of using you as a guinea pig. So, understand what the test is, understand how it's graded. For me, I did take a prep course, and there are all different kinds. I don't remember the name of the course that I took, but if the person who's teaching it knows what they're talking about, the prep courses are really fantastic because there's no, maybe some people can write the LSAT without preparing for it. I think if I didn't take a prep course, I wouldn't have got the mark that I did. So I took a prep course. What I also did, and everyone is different, I took one less course. So I went right from undergrad to law school. So I wrote my LSAT in fourth year, first term. But I took a summer course in my summer of third year, and that's when I took the LSAT prep course. So I guess I had 4 courses that semester, and I studied for the LSAT, which I think it's written the end of September at that time. And then I used the rest of that, instead of taking 5 courses, the extra time to write applications. So, and I did it in more of a truncated, timeline. So the prep course really helped, and honestly, I was like writing one, practice test a day, really in preparation for it. And maybe not all 6 portions, but I think it's the 4 sections that apply. So you have to time yourself. They teach you all the tips and tricks, how many questions to attempt. You understand all the different types of questions, and there's really only a finite amount of things they can ask. What to look for in the argument section and all those things. So the prep course really, really helped. The rules around when you reattempt the course or this and that, they teach you all of that. So yeah, I think the prep course really, really helped. And it depends on how you learn. I am like I like learning in a classroom. So, and I had a great teacher. If someone learns better kind of just listening and not seeing things, that's great. If learn better from reading, there's a lot of ways to do that now too.
So moving forward to your like after going to LSAT and going to Windsor Law, how was that experience for you at law school? What was your favorite thing about it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed law school. I was involved in kind of student government and kind of extracurricular stuff as well, and every school has that. My what I will look back on really fondly in law school were the courses that weren't taught like theoretical courses. They were fantastic too. I really liked labor law. I had a professor who was he taught the material really well. I had some fantastic professors in first year. My constitutional law professor, uh, it felt like nothing he said made sense all year until the very last course, and everything kind of clicked. And I really he taught the Constitution in a very unique way. And actually, this was, I guess that was in 2008, 2009. And I tell you, the more time goes on, the more relevant his lectures are. Really, truly. But what I look back fondly on two courses. One of them was ADR, so alternative dispute resolution, and we had to do like a mock mediation, right? But not only we were the mediator ones, and then we were each side as well, and so we did those mock courses. And the other course was at Windsor they called it the advocacy in front of administrative tribunal. It was taught by a lawyer and a judge. That lawyer who taught it is now a judge, so he was a fantastic professor, and he taught you what you need to know about advocacy, not in front of a court, but you need that you learn those skills as well, and that's a separate course. But in front of administrative tribunals, and I do a lot of that work now, especially in front of the Human Rights Tribunal. So those courses that they taught it in a classroom, but it wasn't just okay. Here's my lecture. Now write a paper and then write 100% exam or 50% exam, or I wasn't like 100% exam. This was teaching the skills that you build on actually in practice of law. So I think rarely those are offered in first year, but in the upper years, I say take as many of those courses as possible because you can use those experiences in your interviews, and you use those skills as you practice. And they have all different types. At Windsor, they have like a trademarks like program. Every law school, I think, has like a community legal aid section where you can, instead of taking courses, you advocate for people in court. So anything that gets you out of that standard classroom, I say those are the most important classes.
Yeah, I mean, definitely I feel like I've always also learned through more like experiential learning, as you mentioned, like
Yeah,
the learning by doing, like actually getting kind of like I guess hands-on experience without it actually being, type of professional experience. It's more like like a preparation. It's better
yeah,
preparation because it's more realistic. It's putting, what you're learning with the textbooks into practice. So I definitely hope that whichever law school I get into offers courses like that.
yeah.
Um, and you mentioned like a lot like the courses that you liked and everything. And considering that you're in employment law right now, did you know like going into law school and choosing your courses that you wanted to do employment law?
In first year, I didn't. So when I applied to law school, I didn't, and I was quite open to all the different areas of law. I guess I knew it wouldn't. I knew I wasn't really going to go into like the really heavy corporate type courses, or that type of law, or finance, or things like that, or tax law, for example. There's only a certain amount of courses you could take. So a lot of my courses were sided on like advocacy, public policy, public law type courses. So employment law really is a happy medium between being a barrister and being a solicitor, because there's plenty of day-to-day, corporate advising that I do. But then I turn my business card over and I'm a litigator. when my clients need it. So yeah, because there's only a finite amount of time and course that you can take, you do have to have a more of a general idea. And you can get that through first year as well. First year is kind of a broad overview of like the basic areas of law. And so after I finished first year, and I was picking second year courses, that's when I said, okay, I think I'm more interested in employment law and labor law advocacy. So I went to those courses, but I took criminal law, I took estates, real estate law. You have to take all different types of courses. And really, you're really preparing for the bar exam too. So I took a variety of courses, more so on the advocacy, public law.
So going into, your field today and your day to day, what is it that you like and what's like your favorite thing about employment law?
Hmm. Okay, that's a good question. So, like I said, my role, my clients require me to sometimes give them like day-to-day legal advice. But then in the same day, I might, you might take calls in the morning and then have a discovery in the afternoon. So I really like in employment law, it's you're both a barrister and a solicitor, or at least you can be. There are plenty of lawyers out there, employment lawyers who are, very heavily focused on the litigation side of it. But some of those same clients might need you to advise on, purchasing a business or selling a business, maybe dealing with employees before it gets to litigation. So I like the variety that of work. I'm really working on both sides of, my brain, both sides of being barrister and solicitor. And then I think also for a lot of different areas of law, you have to be comfortable with giving advice. And they don't, I guess law school doesn't really prepare you for that. Law school is fantastic at preparing you to hone your skills. But in terms of giving advice, it takes a little bit of practice, okay? Because no one has a crystal ball. But your clients will ask you, both on the barrister side and solicitor side, they're going to ask you, well, what's going to happen in the future? What will happen if I do this? Or, they'll ask you to try and tell the future. So you have to be comfortable in giving advice, knowing, understanding kind of the limits of the law and talking to your client in a way that they're going to understand. There are all different types of clients. They're sophisticated, maybe not as sophisticated. It might be a corporation, it might be an individual person. So my role is it's both giving advice, like day-to-day advice, and it's also, advocating for the client. So it's a good mix.
And you mentioned you have like multiple roles in a sense, in your job, you get to sometimes be a solicitor, sometimes a barrister. So, having that kind of diverse skill set and everything, what do you think your typical day to day is, when you're dealing with all these other issues?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say let's talk about a typical week because you could be in discoveries for a whole day, right? That's basically 10 to 4, 10 to 5.
Yeah.
And discovery, it's really it's a lot of fun. If you like kind of questioning, if you like interrogating, discovery is really great. It's not cross examination; it's a little different. But discovery, especially um, when the client's really motivated and it's an interesting case, discovery can be really interesting. So I tend not to look at the day to day, but it's really a mixture of the advocacy side. So like I said, you might be in a discovery and mediation, maybe a short hearing. It could be a trial, it could be a summary judgment matter, summary trial, and that takes up a good chunk of your day. There's a lot in my work of, like I said, the day-to-day advising. So I'm hopping on and off calls or Zoom calls, or you're meeting with a client. There is a good portion of kind of like independent work, whereas you need to draft documents, review, kind of strategize, review someone else's work and kind of, critique that and improve it. So there's uh, uh, a lot of independent work as well. I think because of the pandemic, some, but not all, court procedures have moved virtually as well. So before, where may have been they're doing discoveries in person or mediations in person, which are quite common. That's near the beginning of the civil litigation process. A lot of those are now being done virtually. So there used to be a lot more travel, and even court, certain lower level court hearings or initial court hearings are being done virtually. So there's more of that that's being done, and that's actually across the board, not just for Superior Court, but for tribunals and provincial offenses and things like that. So there's probably less travel in a week, which means, I mean, you have more personal time, you have more time to work. So for me, there's a good mix of like the advocacy side and the direct advising.
And you since you have so much going on in every weekend, every day seems like it's a bit different than the previous one. Would you say that like your typical clients, that you have a typical client, or do you feel like you also have like a vast, pool of clients that are different from one another?
Yeah, no, I think there are a variety of clients out there. I think it really depends on the type of firm that you're at. If you're in a large firm, uh, the clients may be more biased towards larger, national, multinational, corporations, for example. But there may even still be individual clients, personal clients that you might help. I think I'm at a firm. There's about 35 lawyers, so there we have clients of all different sizes. There's individual individual clients, personal clients. There are small business owners. There are business owners who probably wouldn't call themselves small businesses because they might have really a lot of revenue, but they just have a smaller amount of employees, let's say. There are startups, which they're very eager, but they might not be big, but they have a lot of room to grow. And larger businesses, and like I said, kind of the national, multinational types of businesses, and with higher amounts of revenue. So it really depends on the firm that you're at and the type of law that you do. If you're a family lawyer, let's say, and we have family lawyers in my firm, typically you're working for individuals, right? They may be high net worth, they might be kind of the average person, and our commercial litigators, they really only work for corporation, small, medium, and large businesses. So it depends on the area of law. I work with all different types, owner operator businesses up to multinational, corporations with locations in Canada.
Well, I guess it keeps your job and your day to day interesting, since you never deal with the same every time.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so I've asked you, and we talked about your favorite thing about, employment law and your job and everything. But what would you say would be your least favorite then?
Hmm. Um, I would say my least favorite is, I guess it's about understanding yourself, understanding your own limits, especially as it relates to mental health. Okay, I think stress is a part of the job of being a lawyer. Okay, because people come to you for advice. Number one, of course, we have our legal insurance, but you know you might have to use your legal insurance. You hope that you don't, but you might have to use that. So you have to be confident in the advice that you give. Number one. Number two, you have to be able to work on multiple matters, not at the same time, but you do juggle it. So you're helping different clients kind of all at once. You have to be able to manage your time. Uh, the former, no, I'm not sure if I'm getting this right, the former Chief Justice of Ontario, I don't know if he was Chief Justice, but Justice Strathey, I believe, he wrote a paper last April about litigators and mental health litigators. I really encourage all of your viewers to find that paper and read it. So he wrote it in April, but it really got picked up by the media in the fall, and he did like a presentation on it. And he talked about like litigator as gladiator, right? There's this idea that, well, if you're a litigator, you have to do whatever it takes to win your case. But his honor said that's not really what litigation is all about. I'm sure I can send you the link for it too. I have it saved. It's a really, really good paper just to understand, how I think for anyone watching, if they're considering going into litigation, to understand what it means to be a litigator and to know yourself, right? And to know your, how you deal with stress. Everyone will deal with stress in a different way. So yeah, that was actually, it's a really, really good read. There was something else from his paper. It's not coming to me right now, but it was really yeah, really heartfelt. And he said there should be more attention paid to, litigators. Oh, that's what I was going to say. I mean, there are plenty of cases out there, and in law school you read them. You can go on Canly, you can find them there too. Generally, in litigation, there's one winner and one loser. So that's just the way the system is set up. And so I think also you have to, as lawyers, you have to think about, well, what is your motivation in taking on a case? Because, and I'm not saying it's impossible to win every case, because maybe it is possible, but how you deal with the stress of, getting to a trial and completing the trial, and is something I think any litigator should consider, and any future litigator should consider. So definitely take a look at that paper. It's a really good one.
Yeah, I will actually. That seems really interesting. So thank you for sharing with that. I've been doing conducting these interviews. I've had the chance to talk to several lawyers. And each time I learned so much.
Mhm.
Even in this conversation alone, I mean, what you've just said is, everyone gives different answers, but it's one that I think isn't talked about enough. Um,
Yeah.
with every lawyer I speak to, I think, stress comes into the conversation in the interview, like the stress factor, the busyness, or sometimes, like I'm talking to a criminal lawyer, so then it's like even, dealing with criminals themselves or people who are
Well,
accused of or charged wrongly.
alleged
Alleged,
criminals.
sorry.
Wait.
Yes. Alleged criminals,
They
innocent
are
until proven
innocent until
guilty.
proven. They're just called clients. They're just people.
Yes, they're clients. Apologies. Yes, they're clients. And even with like even in those conversations, like the emotions of it all and like the stress will be
Mhm.
mentioned, but I don't think like the mental health aspect has been mentioned enough. So I think that's a very interesting and important aspect to mention and like for every student to take into consideration. Because it's definitely a big part of the job as you
Yeah, yeah.
mentioned. So going on to like your everyday workplace and everything. And I guess also your perspective of law in general. So, nowadays there's a lot of misconceptions about what it means to be a lawyer, with movies, TV shows,
Oh
Suits,
yeah.
Legally Blonde, everything. So, in your experience, has there been a myth or, a certain misconception that you'd like to debunk or, really reveal the truth of the matter to?
There are a few. Let's start with the kind of the easier ones. Um, Law and Order, sure, Legally Blonde, but I think the most recent one I watched was She-Hulk, which was pretty good, and she's a lawyer. I think a lot of people, or one of the biggest myths, is how quickly any type of legal matter moves on, especially litigation. Now, Law and Order does a half decent job because they put the date when they're moving the story forward. And so people just think, oh, like everything's done in an hour. It's like, oh no, 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 no. Our courts are backed up. Like She-Hulk, they got like a hearing on the merits of the defamation case. I'm not giving anything away, no spoilers. Uh, the defamation is so quickly. It's like, well, it takes a lot of time. Criminal matters usually have priority. They have certain deadlines they have to pass, same with provincial offenses. But civil matters, people say, well, it's been a year. Why can't we get this matter kind of settled? It's like, well, right now in Brampton and Toronto courthouses, they're booking trials 2 years in advance. Like, okay, you're ready for trial. The date you're going to get is, February 2025, or the March sittings in 2025. And it takes time just to be ready for a trial. So I think that is one misconception. In lawyer shows, I think there's not like they don't show off the glamorous side of it, which is like I mentioned before, like the independent, aspect of it. There's a lot of work you have to do. I like doing it, like a lot of reading and writing, and that takes time. But it's not glamorous to show on a TV show. And then on the other side of that is there are plenty of lawyers who work together and they work on teams. And TV shows don't really show you that, okay, well, we're not all islands. You really do work together, depending on the area of law, but you're working on a team. So you're not really alone. You're usually kind of working with someone else. You might be working with other lawyers or paraprofessionals or assistants or co-counsel or things like that. So there's so much other support within, especially some areas of law over others. So those are the misconceptions off the top of my head. But yeah, it's really the speed in which it's like they never show lawyers like, spending 3 hours to read or to, draft a fact. Like, where's that? They
Yeah.
didn't show that on Suits. They just show the fun part. But it's the same for probably every other industry. The medical kind of dramas or Ross from Friends was a paleontologist. They don't show a lot of that. They show a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, even in taking law classes, I mean, I haven't had the opportunity to take many, but since I'm a poli-sci student, I've tried to take as many as I possibly can. So,
Mhm.
I've taken, I think, one on Constitution, and like right now I'm taking a public policy one, in relation to law. And just when I read these cases, I'm like, wow, like this is ongoing. It's been 14 years, and it's like, I think it definitely burst the bubble because, again, the TV shows and everything make it seem like, oh, it's done in like maybe like max a year or months if it's like a really big case.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's even like in She-Hulk like a couple days or right away, and it's yeah, it's definitely
Right.
not
And
reality.
and it plays into like how people perceive lawyers, how people perceive the legal system. It's true, speeding tickets, like those type of low-level provincial offenses, they're dealt with pretty quickly because they're higher volume, but they're easier to get through. Some employment matters, easily it can take 2 years, and maybe it's settled, maybe it's not. There was a recent class action claim related to employment law and overtime and yeah, overtime pay. Class action lawsuit, it took 14 or 13 years,
Wow.
right? Like it was started in 2006, now it's 2023. I don't know how many years that is. Uh, so that is the biggest misconception, right?
Okay.
How slowly matters move through civil court.
Yes, well, thank you for
Yeah.
debunking the myth of time. Um and actually I was gonna ask you, what do you feel like you have a case that has been um very influential or for you and like that has stuck by you?
Hmm. Um, when I was earlier in my career, I was helping more employees. Now I'm help more so employers and corporations. Whenever but really, law is a people business. Like your client might be the corporation, but there are people behind the corporation. So you're always kind of helping people. So when I was working for plaintiffs, commencing wrongful dismissal actions, and you really do have like a big difference. You make a big difference in their lives. And yeah, sometimes there are employers who don't fully understand their obligations, and you're required to commence litigation and you enforce the law and get a settlement in a lot of cases, and that person can move on. So it earlier on in my career, that was really it was a like it was fulfilling to help those people, kind of get closure from that chapter and help them kind of move on to their next chapter. And even now, I still help, senior employees, executives, senior salespeople. So there's still that, it's a smaller aspect of my practice, but also, helping a small business owner operator, sometimes there are frivolous lawsuits that are started. So if I can help them understand the law, come up with the right arguments and help them, through litigation as well, like that's very fulfilling too.
Of course, yeah, you're helping somebody, and it's fulfilling, as you said. I can only imagine with like having that experience. And
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of lawyers I've spoken to as well, like everyone will say, different things, but it's nice to know that like the after all the work that one puts into law school and everything, there's it's gratifying in a sense.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'm in like the kind of labor and employment sphere. There are so many different areas. Um, criminal family law, you're working with people. There's litigation, there's estates, buying a business, selling a business. Real estate is really popular, a lot of work there. So there are a lot of different areas of law. At the end of the day, really, law is about the relationships with the people, right? You might have a personal client, you might have a corporation. A corporation is run by a person or people, so it's really about the relationships that you make.
Great. Well, we've got into the last question. And I'd just like to say, thank you so much for all of your time, all of your answers and your patience and everything. So,
Of course.
it's very, very helpful, inspirational to so many students. So, yes, our last question is, do you have any advice or, anything that you would say to the next upcoming future lawyers?
Oh wow, that is good. Okay, so I'll repeat something I just said, which was about law. I see it. It's about the relationships that you make. It's about relationships you've made and relationships you have yet to make. So I think understanding, people generally is important. I'm not saying you have to be an extrovert. Okay. You could be an extrovert or an introvert and, be successful at, making relationships with people. There is, I mean, right now, probably there's more of a bias towards extroverts, right? People who are more outgoing and they can talk to anyone, do small talk. I really think, I don't know, I saw something on social media today that like 90% of high performers are introverts. So, but I think it comes down to how you sell yourself. Okay. And there's so much, first of all, law firms, corporations need introverts. They know who the extroverts are because you can hear them a mile away. But introverts are just as important. So do not, so my first piece of advice would be don't let, like if you're an extrovert, okay, do your thing. Don't forget there are introverts out there. And if there are introverts out there, there is so much value that and expertise and obviously skill that an introvert can bring to the table. But it's important that you market yourself appropriately. Yeah, that would be my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice, I think, like I said before, if you can say something in one page or 3 pages, pick the shorter one. Be concise, be brief. It's usually in your best interest. What else would I say? Yeah, and it'd be like I mentioned before. Those courses or any of those experiences that can get you kind of even a small kind of piece of the action, that is so important when looking for jobs or even applying for law school, applying for summer positions, articling positions, associate positions, lawyer positions. It shows that there are a few things that it shows. It shows that you're very eager, right? It shows that you're resourceful. You know how to find these opportunities and land them. It shows that other people have trusted you with even a small amount of authority. there's a little bit of psychology behind that. Um, and it kind of gets your feet wet, you know. There's nothing wrong with taking, a role or an internship if you're not sure you want to do it. You can learn, you can always learn something from it. But B, you can, know if that's what you want to do, or know that that's what you do not want to do. So you can say, I had a short stint in accident benefits, which is a small area. Well, it's not small, but it's one area of tort law and kind of insurance defense and personal injury. I tried it and I didn't like it. And, I maybe I wouldn't have known that if I didn't try it. So I think being open to mentorship, being open to new experiences is really important. And you can learn a lot about yourself. Like I said, about what you like and what you don't like. And you can confidently say in an interview or personal statement, it's like, I know I do not want to do tax law. I took the course. I don't want to do that. Or, you took the labor law course and you really liked it. And now I know that's all I want to do. So yeah, being open to mentorship, being open to, constructive criticism can serve a person really, really well.
Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. I'm sure that students listening to this, me myself as well, will definitely take every single thing that you said. I know that it's going to come in handy in the future. So thank you once again for your time and, for your insightful responses and everything. And yeah, so I would just like to say to everyone else who's tuning in right now, thank you so much. And yeah, have a great day, everyone.